This is Sporting Life.
Well, welcome along to a Sporting Life Racing podcast. We're a little different. We have two members of the team in Sussex, two in Yorkshire, one in Cork. Ed Chamberlain, I'm going to start with, David Ord, joined by Ed Chamberlain, David Johnson, Graham Cunningham and Billy Nash. Ed, I'm going to start with you. Ascot on Saturday, the King George. We were so looking forward to it. Mouth-watering clash. Not the winner you were expecting to see.
No, not really. It was a brilliant performance, wasn't it? I mean, the two standout performances you could argue at Ascot this season have been by the two Graffard horses in the King Edward VII and then the King George on Saturday. Personally, before the race, I thought he might travel like he did at the Royal Meeting and then not be good enough at the end, but he was much the best, Audie. And we praised Ballydoyle a lot on here and on ITV for all their tactics and the pacemaking that GC referred to this time last week, but they got it badly wrong, didn't they? I mean, they went so hard. They really did. And Soumillon gave the winner a brilliant ride, to be honest. And then the shock afterwards was hearing from Ryan Moore beforehand saying the ground was perfect, good ground or whatever he said in the interview with Ollie a few minutes before the King George. And then I was amazed when Aidan came out and said what he did about the ground. I was not expecting that. And so that sort of took a little bit of a gloss off the day in many ways, but I think Goliath, Soumillon and his trainer deserve enormous credit.
David, Aidan said it was never good to soft, no good to firm to be seen. You have sent a withering response.
Well, it's just one of them. I mean, maybe we're looking at it from two different kinds of way, but by judging it purely on the times, there's just no way that you can suggest that there's any good to soft in that surface. The winning time for the race was the fifth fastest this year. The fifth fastest since the track was relayed in 2005. And we called the ground good to soft when Hookham won it last year. And Goliath's time was over 6 seconds quicker. So, yeah, in terms of judging it purely on the times, it was good to firm, pretty close to what Chris Stickles was calling it, I think.
And GC, it leaves a question again for the fifth time I think we put it. Where are we now with August Rodan? Aidan slightly dialing it down yesterday, said that it was not a horse who wants to positively ride at 1.5 miles now.
Quite. I'm always here for the vivid post-race explanations. I won't call them excuses. And he says now that Gus doesn't do down and dirty, which is probably true, but doing down and dirty is a good thing in a horse. Witness Giant's Causeway and top class animals like that. I think probably my key takeaway on that ground angle and the pace angle is that 3 horses, international Group 1 winners, who'd all won Group 1 races on their latest start, Rebels Romance, August Rodan and Luxembourg, raced in 2nd, 3rd and 4th, and they were beaten a combined total of over 30 lengths. That tells me pretty much all I need to know about the way the King George shut down.
And Billy, you don't like to second guess what's going to happen, but you presume they're going to run before the Japan Cup. It'll be a 10 furlongs for August Rodan next.
You would imagine a lot will depend on how City of Troy gets on in the Juddmonth, I think, Ardy. We'll see how he goes there first. But I would think the Irish Champion Stakes back at Leopardstown, the way AC won last year, seems to be the logical one for August Rodan. It wasn't a particularly strong renewal he won last year. He beat Luxembourg. I think they'd be hoping to get something similar again this time around. Maybe hoping that White Birch doesn't turn up or something like that,
And disappointing news again, David, with Passenger, who we saw reappear at York and pick up a season-ending injury, maybe not career-ending injury, but he's just a colt who then they've never got a clear shot at things with.
No, exactly. And I mean, watching the race unfold, you could see that it was developing into a bit of a farce where they weren't going any sort of gallop. But the way that he finished off, you're thinking, well, okay, he's not won, but in terms of that being as a stepping stone to a race like the Juddmonth, it looked like it was job done. But unfortunately, as you say, he's ended up picking up an injury there that looks like if it doesn't end his career, it's certainly going to end his season. And it's just unfortunate that these really interesting horses that look like they could really put it to City of Troy and give us a stronger idea of how good he definitely is, they're just beginning to fall by the wayside, unfortunately.
Really, it's a time of year when good races pass you by. There's a cracking cat at Leopardstown last week. Bedtime Story we saw win again. Graham North, interesting on her in watch and learn this week. Did we learn anything new about Bedtime Story? Do you remain as excited as you were post Ascot?
Oh, you'd have to be still excited about her, Dave, but we certainly didn't learn much about her at Leopardstown. It was a weak renewal of that race. It's a race that Aidan has kind of farmed in recent years. It's a weak renewal. She beat a stable companion exactly, who was essentially her pacemaker, and she picked her up and beat her as you would expect her to do. She didn't need to repeat her, what she did at Ascot the time before from a ratings point of view. But yeah, she's still a very promising filly. It's onwards and upwards from here. You'd imagine she'll follow the tried and trusted route of probably the debutante next, and then onto the Mydler Stakes on Champions Weekend.
I'm still firmly in the fairy godmother camp. I don't know whether anyone's changed their vote from when we did that original vote.
Or the poll. I mean, we could put another poll up.
Yeah, Simmering gave that another boost. I'm still firmly fairy godmother.
I think, unfortunately, it's one of those where we're not going to need to vote, are we? Because Aidan sounds like he's pretty much mapped a plan where he's going to be able to keep them apart, with fairy godmother looking like she's going to stay down the 6 furlong route for now, doesn't she? So a little bit disappointing in that regard. But yeah, both of them obviously two high quality fillies.
Let's look back at Goodwood, day one. GC, you were there. Kyprios, I think it's fair to say, stole the show with an utterly dominant performance in the Goodwood Cup.
Yeah, they're not machines, but sometimes you have to treat them as such. And he beat Sweet William by pretty much the same distance he'd beaten him by at Ascot. And I don't know what you think, lads, but my impression was that another 150 yards a furlong, he'd have been 8 or 9 lengths clear. He was really pouring it on late on. So he's a terrific horse, and I think that is a great story. And I believe all of it, how close he was to being finished and how difficult it was to rebuild him again. So imagine what his CV would be like with a completely clear run. He'd be, I suspect, Billy, he'd be nudging 10 Group 1s now, wouldn't he?
Well, he'd have to be very close, GC, yeah. He's obviously last year was a bit of a write-off, but you'd have to think that he would now have 3 Ascot Gold Cups and a few more races under his belt like that. So it'd be interesting to see what they do with him now, Ardy. Aidan was talking about possibly the Irish and Ledger. He also has Tower of London for that. He has a strong hand in those races. He could go there. I suppose he could go to Doncaster, but interestingly, that's a race that Aidan doesn't seem to kind of target with his stayers anymore. I was looking through the records this morning. He hasn't won the Doncaster Cup since 2008. He won it 2 years in a row and hasn't won it since. So that, the kind of stayers triple crown doesn't seem to be on his radar anymore. So it looks like maybe the Irish and Ledger, and we'll see after that. But or the Long Distance Cup, that's the other kind of one that's missing off his CV at the moment.
Doncaster's a really hard sell for a horse like him when you look at the prize money there. You see what they offer at York, and then 3 weeks later, compared to what you'd be offered at Doncaster, it's just not an appealing option for them types of horses, I don't think.
Johnson unloads salvo at Arc. Love it.
There is nobody safe. I'm concerned as we move into the... No, we'll stick clear of the race of politics. Ed, does it feel like Kyprios, did it feel like he's a horse with a crowd of tanks? I can remember last year we were man-marking Paddington through there. Was it a similar sort of reaction?
Yeah, I think people have really taken him to their hearts. The story that GC refers to, that was a life-threatening injury. It really was. And they've nursed him back brilliantly, and he's making up for lost time. There were 2 really interesting things about yesterday, Audie. Our position, ITV position, is over to the left between the paddock and the pre-parade. I've never seen a horse get to the pre-parade so early as Kyprios yesterday. A good hour before the Goodwood Cup. We were thinking, can that be him? Because the horses hadn't even come in for the Lennox, and there he was going round and round and round in 30-degree heat. Pat Keating was awash. You wouldn't have backed him to win any kind of race. And Kyprios was very, very warm, and I was thinking, this has got to be a negative with him going round in the heat. But they obviously know him so well. That must be all part of the Ballydoyle preparation. And as GC says, he was just getting going at the end there. And listen, the track might have been slightly different, but to still smash the course record like that, it needed a just look at the clock moment. I mean, it was unbelievable. I thought there'd been a mistake. He absolutely obliterated the course record.
Can I just come in there? Sorry, Ed, to correct you. There's a little bit of a debate around the course record, and I think it comes from when it was remeasured in around 2017, because Yates ran a time that was only 0.02 seconds slower than what Kyprios did when he won the race in 2006. It was over a slightly different distance then, perhaps, but I think that's sort of the reason why that it looked like it was such a good course record, because David, that was basically only 6 or 7 years old.
Would that have stopped David Vine? Would that have stopped David Coleman? Would that have stopped Barry Davis?
Well, but they might have had the foresight to get the big clock ready like you had for Batash. I said to Billy at the start, because this will be a course record, they should have a big clock by the finish.
William Darby, if you're listening, William.
It's now looking like Trawlerman is one of very few horses who could give Kyprios a race, isn't it?
Mhm.
So Trawlerman nutted him at Ascot last autumn, ran into a length at Ascot. So the rematch between Kyprios and Trawlerman, wherever that takes place, that is the one horse who could put it up to him, I think.
And GC, one horse you can't take your eyes off at the minute is Audience this season. I mean, things served up perfectly for me that Lennox, but thank you. But I mean, where are you with him now, Dale Jekyll and Hyde Audience?
He's cost me a few quid, that horse. Either laying him or backing horses against him. I asked David Johnson about this yesterday. He said he didn't think Audience had ever had a time form squiggle. He's had a few negative comments. He's had a squiggle in my personal record book for a long while, and I've had to eat my words because he's put two really impressive performances together at Newbury and at Goodwood, and defined a Group 1 penalty. Has to go down as a career best, and David, you can't help but put a big number on that, surely.
Well, it's one of those where if you took it literally, you would do, but I think the way that this race panned out, you just have to acknowledge that the likes of Kinross and all those further back, Pogo, English Show, they were just held up too far off the pace. It looked like they were going to go a real good gallop given how most of them race, and it just didn't pan out that way, did it? Art Power very much allowed the run of things, Audience perfectly placed, just behind him, and asserted without really having to be asked for his maximum. And I think that's how you get the best out of Audience, isn't it? He is a kind of horse that has to do it all his own way and on the bridle, but when he's allowed to do that, he's obviously a very smart performer. So we've taken a pretty low view of the race. I only got him rated 122, but you're hard pushed to be confident that those behind would reverse the placings in something like the City of York, given he's going to go there without the penalty that he defied here.
How come he doesn't have a penalty if he's won a Group 1 this season?
I think it's the conditions of that race that they put them in specifically and put in a load of prize money to try to attract the Group 1 horses so that they can get the race elevated to Group 1 level.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, yeah.
Are you listening in France, French officials? That should be a Group 1, that York race. The black ball gets rolled out every international pattern committee meeting. We know where it's coming from. Ed, one man who was bubbling away nicely all of a sudden, Charlie Appleby, 3 good 2-year-old winners, including Amore City yesterday in the Vintage Stakes.
Yeah, that was very good, wasn't it? Again, and he's got a strong hand, hasn't he? I sense the vibes about Ruling Court are probably the strongest at the minute, and I think that horse will go to the Acomb at the Ebor meeting, and I think yesterday's winner might go Gimcrack, something like that. And yeah, the question is, will he kick on now with these? We've been here before, and I can't get this yard right at all. As soon as I get excited about one, it seems to go wrong. So it'd be nice for Charlie Appleby to be next year right in amongst it at festivals like this. And the early signs from those 2-year-olds are very good. And that was very professional yesterday, I thought.
And David, that Ruling Court, I mean, it cost 2.3 million. You'd expect he could shift because he gave him the breeze ups, but he got a big time fall number and a big P off the back of that stand down performance. And Graham North again, some interesting fractionals in his closing 2 furlongs as well.
And I think that's the interesting thing, isn't it, about what this horse does it, and it's pretty much all about the potential as much as anything, as far as I'm concerned. And Al Kudra, he's had 5 starts to earn 106p. Amorei City, I think it was his 4th start. He's on 105. And Ruling Court only 97. But like you say, he's got the large P. He's only had the 1 run. And I was off last week, so I didn't actually see it until I was going through the video when you sent the running order through. And he just didn't go through the race like I expected once I knew the result. He was very green early on, wasn't he? Having to be pushed along to hold his position in the early stages, but that move that he made early in the straight was really impressive. And I mean, he was still pretty green under pressure in the closing stages. His head was a little bit high, but it certainly didn't stop him going forward. And the distance that he put between him and the rest was really impressive. And as Ed says, the Acomb next, and you'd be very surprised if he isn't making into a pattern race performer Will he train on? That's the only concern, being by Justified, of course.
Justified's got it now. This is just unbelievable. It's time to stop looking back. It's time to look ahead. And Billy, if you'd have seen the panic on these grids between 10:00 and 10:03 before you appeared for this next section, which is the Galway hurdle and the Galway plate, the two big races of the week at that magnificent festival. All you need to do now, Billy, is give us the double. Give us the ammunition.
Come on, Billy. Come on, Billy.
Game. Come on.
No pressure. I like it. Galway Plate looks a cracking race this year, Ardy. One I'm really looking forward to. Percival de Galway is top rated with time form. I can see why he's favoured. I think he probably deserves to be. He was very close in the Leopardstown chase. He ran really well at Punchestown the last day. He's probably short enough in the mark, but I wouldn't put anyone off him. I think he's got a great chance. I see there's been a lot of talk about Zana here, who was not badly handicapped on the pick of his hurdles form. I'm just not convinced the hustle and bustle of a big field handicap around Galway is exactly what he needs. Inic Deo has a chance, but he's a horse that likes to come from off the pace. Again, not ideal around Galway. Willie's got 5 in the race. They've all got some sort of chances. I think Authorised Art might turn out to be the best of his. He ran really well in the race last year. He'd be maybe the each-way value. But the one I like in the race is Henry de Bromhead's Let's Go Champ. He's a horse that I've had on my radar for this race for a while. He was very impressive at Punchestown in a handicap on his last start. Prior to that, he'd been running in really hot maiden chases. Finished third to American Mike in Fact to File early in the season. He's a lightly raced horse. He's a really good jumper. He likes to race close to the pace, which is ideal at Galway. I think he's got a lot in his favour, and he's the one that I like for the plate. The hurdle is a wide open race. It's a more difficult race to solve, I think. There's a couple in there that might just be a little bit better than handicappers. Daddy Longlegs is one. His romp at Punchestown is still fresh in the memory, but he was put up £15 for that, which is quite a significant chunk. The favourite at the moment is under control of Nicky Henderson's, who was a very promising filly a couple of years ago, only got to the track twice last year, also had 2 breathing operations, which is a bit off-putting. But look, she has to be respected. I'm not sure how well handicapped she is, but obviously Nicky is, you have to give him the utmost respect when he brings one to Ireland. But I think looking at last year's race, the 2 horses that finished in the frame last year that are back again will definitely go well again at each way prices. You've my mate Mozzie, who's actually top rated with time form, ran a cracker at Ascot the last day. He hasn't won the amount of races that a horse of his ability should, but he'll travel well through the race. He'll probably be the last off the bridle. He's around 12 or 14 to 1. He'll definitely give you a run for your money at an each way price, as will Jesse Evans of Noel Meads, who's a horse with a tremendous record at Galway, second in the race last year, ran really well on the flat the other day. He's coming to a peak as well. So I think each way, the 2 of them, you won't go far wrong.
Fantastic stuff. There you go. Some thoughts on the big races at Galway.
Can I stay with Billy for a second?
Of course you can, Jason.
I wanted to just canvass Billy's opinion on this new initiative that's coming in Ireland. How many races is it, Billy, that are going to be restricted to trainers who've had less than a certain number of winners? Is it 50 or 60 races or something like that?
Yeah, so they're bringing in 60 races from starting next season, or maybe even this season now, I suppose. They're bringing in 60 races that are confined to trainers that haven't trained 50 winners in either of the past 2 seasons. So essentially what that means is that there's 4 trainers can't compete in these races. You have Gordon Elliott, Willie Mullins, Henry de Bromhead and Gavin Cromwell. So everybody else has now 60 races that they can compete in without fear of bumping into one of the big guns, which I suppose is one way of levelling the playing field. But like 60 races out of, it's a small proportion, but still it's a step in the right direction, maybe.
But Billy, I would never dream of suggesting that a system like this is open to some form of chicanery, but it absolutely is, isn't it?
Well, the cynics amongst us, GC, which I would count you one. Yeah, you would certainly think that there's ways around it, all right, yeah.
Are they open to the British trainers, Billy, with less than 60 runners? I mean, Dr. Newland's just messaged me there.
I was just wondering how many winners the good doctor has trained in the last couple of years. Maybe he's eligible, all right.
He's coming, mate. Don't you worry. He's on his way. Ed Chamberlain, sadly not on the way to Goodwood, is Rasalian. How big a hole does he leave in this afternoon's Catar Stakes?
Oh, massive. Yeah, massive. That's a real shame. That's a race that's lost its headline act, really. You can imagine our VT department are a bit upset with all the things we had prepared for today, but that's the nature of television and really bad luck on the Hannon team. The race has lost much of its lustre, I think it's fair to say. It looks a really muddling affair now, I must say. I find it hard to get my head round having a strong opinion on it. Again, with the Appleby horses, I have no idea what Notable Speech will do today. Genuinely no idea. Henry Longfellow probably is the most solid, but he's very short now, isn't he? I think he's been backed into 6 to 5, something like that. It's a nasty little race now, I think, is the best way I would describe it.
GC, one thing that struck me with Henry Longfellow, he had a pacemaker in the St James's Palace. It teed it up beautifully and he got first shot at things and nearly pulled it off. I'm surprised there isn't one in there with him today just to offer that same assistance.
No, I take a different view, Dave. I had a really good look at this race over the weekend and I saw that Mountain Bear was in there and River Tiber was in there, presumably one or both as the potential hares. And I think they took both out, not wanting proper pace in that race. I think they want Henry Longfellow to be the one to dictate and quicken at the opportune moment. And this looks a very good tactical setup for him. I might be wrong about this, but it's a weird thing to say about a horse with such a high profile, such a high rating. I still think he might be a bit undervalued, Henry. My only problem for today is I liked him with Rosalien in as a potential value bet at 7-2 or 4-1. At 11-10 or 6-5, as Ed says, it's a different proposition. But I wouldn't be surprised if he shows himself a real good horse today. I think Factor Cheval is potentially slightly overpriced. And as Ed says, a fair bit of the polish has come off the race. But I have a feeling that Henry Longfellow might show himself to be a proper Group 1 miler today.
Billy, what are you expecting from the Ballydoyle colt?
I would agree with a lot of what GC said there. I think I'm right in saying Aidan reckoned they made a little bit too much use of him at Ascot, and maybe that's why they don't have a pacemaker in the race today. I would expect him to go from the front. I think he'll take plenty of beating. But as GC said, if there is one in the race to upset the front two, it's probably Factor Cheval. I'm a bit like Ed. I don't really know what to expect from Notable Speech. If he's as good as he showed in the Guineas, then he's probably the one to beat. But, you know, the Ascot run was very disappointing. So on balance, I think Henry Longfellow is probably the one to beat. But at the prices, he's a bit too short for me, I think.
David, the thing with Notable Speech, nothing has come to light to explain the Ascot run, but I keep watching the video back of that Guineas now. We went through it and then picked up. He looks so exciting crossing the line at Newmarket. Are you going to give him another chance?
I won't be having a bet on him, no, and it's part of the reason is because of the tactical element, and I think that's one of the reasons why Henry is shortening up quite so much as what he has done, because he looks like he is going to be the obvious front runner that's going to be able to get the race run to suit. And if Notable Speech can do what he did in the Guineas and did what he did at Kempton, then obviously we know that he's got the ability to prove at least as good as Henry Longfellow. But I think one of the points that ought to touch on is the ground. It was the times were obviously really quick yesterday, obviously with, you know, the course record, however far it was beaten by, and it is going to be quick ground. And you look through all of these, and bar Sonny Liston, how many of these can you say you're definitely going to be fully effective on really quick ground? And I mean, you can't really back Sonny Liston given he's got a bit to find and he's going to probably be dropped out last given how he's normally ridden. But I just thought you wouldn't be surprised if some of them bombed out again or didn't give their run in because they're not fully effective under these kind of conditions.
Interesting race and an interesting card. Who else has got anything else for Wednesday? Anything else, David, for you on this card?
Nothing strong. I did put a bet of the day up in the last. It's the 18 runner handicap, and just essentially, I don't want to be backing short price horses in handicaps at this track. And the one that caught my eye is one of Kevin Ryan's, and he's had excuses or he's not given his run. It's this Catch the Paddy, and he blows hot and cold, but he's got a couple of runs that make him pretty interesting. Most recently at Newcastle, a couple of runs back, he ran into that Elner Jam of William Haggis's, and he's gone on in again since. Now, Catch the Paddy, he has bombed out at York himself since then, but they've switched the cheek pieces now, and they're sticking him in first-time blinkers, so maybe that could perk him up. And he's got a good draw in stall 6. He's going to be around 20-1. He's just one of those horses that does have the ability to win off his current mark if he fancies it. So at around 20-1, I thought he was more interesting than quite a few in that race.
Should say well done to David and Billy. We've got 6 time form experts on the best of time form on Sporting Life, offering up their best bets for Goodwood and Galway each day. And 4 of the 6, you're the only 2 who didn't put up French Duke in the first race. So time form all in on French Duke in the first. in against Dave Ord's Nap of the Day as well on Sporting Life in Lord of Love. So I'm taking on the might of Time Farm there. GC,
Wow.
your World Pool plays are available on Sporting Life. They're live now. What else is on your radar for today?
Well, I need to make a move after that wretched fair wind yesterday. Wouldn't come out of the stalls. I was sick about that. I really fancied him. I need to do something today because I think it gets a bit more difficult as the week goes on. I quite like Subsequent in that first race. I get the case for French Duke and Lord of Love. It's a good race. But I think Subsequent has thrived in steadily run races and he might get his stamina tested today and that'll suit him. Speculator, but I don't think the bar's super high in that Oak Tree Stakes. And I'm intrigued by this Stop the Cavalry. Rafe Beckett could have run her in one of the 16 fillies handicaps this week, but he's decided to go for the Group 3 and she was impressive at Chester. I think Asturias is a very solid Moulcombe favourite. And that fillies handicap, I think, is quite a good betting race. I think Elladonna and Power of Destiny are two really strong candidates. And Elladonna, she's got the hood on and she's a little lazy in front, but she was nicely on top at Salisbury, only £3 higher on Ryan Moore's book for the first time. So I need to make amends today, and I'm hoping it'll work out with a few of those.
Fingers crossed for GC there. Any of those on your shortlist, Ed?
I think the nap of the day is probably the women's quadruple sculls. I think that's today. They're absolute certainties.
Yeah.
Absolute certainties. Imagine my horror when I woke up this morning, Audie, and see the Oak Trees no longer sponsored by Whispering Angel. I mean, honestly.
Really?
Now the Visit Qatar Oak Tree Stakes. That's a disaster. That is.
They've still got banners around the paddock, Ed.
Well, yeah.
I'm led to believe there's a swish party at 4 p.m. just after ITV come off air as well.
4:01, Audie. 4:01.
4:01, exactly, yeah. So I'm not feeling that sorry for Whispering Angel.
And if he's watching, Ollie Bell needs to resign, Audie. Last night in the Goodwood cricket, because I pulled out because he was captain, they were 1-1-8 for 3, chasing 1-4-2 to win.
Yeah.
And they folded like a pack of cards. The captain has to fall on his sword, I think.
Disgrace, John.
They were about 1.07 on Betfair at the time
Fell out.
Collapsed. But a jarring sight. I always like standing or sitting behind the bowler's arm at the cricket, and I was sitting on a bench, beautiful position, and someone hit a straight drive. I don't know who it was, and 50 times cap for England, Monty Panessa, however you pronounce it. How long is it since he was playing first-class cricket? A decade or so.
Yeah, it's a decade, isn't it?
He moved like a 95-year-old man to try and get this.
In fairness, he moved like he was 85 when he played.
It was jarring, David. It was jarring. I couldn't believe how cumbersome he looked. But no, Bell's critics are mounting after that middle order collapse.
There'll be a banner.
Andy Caddick came on off a 2-pace run up. Nobody could get a glove on the ball, let alone a bat.
Keep your eye on that sign behind you, GC, tonight. There might be a plane flying past with a sign behind it. But I do fancy Dean, the Ed Walker filly in the Moulcombe, or the one that was third.
Could be a bit tricky, couldn't it? She's drawn right towards the far side. That'd be my worry for her.
She's drawn in one, isn't she?
I
think
Billy,
she's good,
any nuggets for you, Billy, at Galway or Goodwood?
Well, I'm glad we're back to talking about racing because that last couple of minutes completely went over my head, Dave. Nothing today at Goodwood. I do like a couple tomorrow, though.
Well, that's a nice segue. Let's move on to Thursday. We've got the Nassau Stakes. Opera Singer up to 10 furlongs. Matt Buckelbank's put her up for the Arc. He thinks she's going to be a 1.5 mile Group 1. Is this a potential middle distance star in the making?
I think she could be, yeah. I do think the step up and triple really suit her. I thought she ran better at Ascot than she did as a Curl. I'd expect her to step up again. No, obviously she's up against all her fillies. And in fairness, Emily Upjohn, she mightn't be the filly she was last year, but her run at the Curl does look an awful lot better now than it did at the time, even with Blue Stockings' performance at the weekend and obviously Contents running the Irish Oaks. So she's the one to beat, but I do think the step up and triple really suit Opera Singer. But I think it could be a good day for Aidan O'Brien because I think he'll win the Garden Stakes with Jan Bruegel, who's a really, really progressive colt, very exciting. He won a Group 3 at the Curl the other day, despite being really green, and he only got going the last furlong. So step up to 1.5 miles and really suit him. Aidan's talking about possibly the St. Ledger for him. He's one to put in the notebook, Ardy. I think he's very good.
Brilliant, thank you, Billy. Two interesting runners for Ballydoyle, David. Those two, and it's a fascinating Nassau Stakes.
Good race.
It is, yeah. Even without Inspiral, obviously, the John and Thady Gosden relied just on Emily Upjohn. But I was a little bit surprised by the betting for this race. When you go through these horses and you look at what they've done, it didn't strike me as two of them being around a 2-1 chance and 13-2 bar. So, and I have gone hunting a little bit, and the one that interests me at around 16-1 is this Stay Alert of Hughie Morrison's. Now, she might have been well beaten in the Pretty Polly, but that was good to soft ground, and she's disappointed on that kind of ground in the past. So I'm perfectly happy to draw a line under that. But you go back to what she did in the Dahlia Stakes, she was impressive where she beat Running Lion by 3.5 lengths. Go back to what she did in last year's Pretty Polly. You know, she finished second in that Group 1, and she basically got wiped out by the winner coming across. And even if you go back to a 3-year-old form, she just progressed really well on a quickish surface over 1.25 miles and further. And I just think 16-1 is a bit insulting for a filly that's got the level of form that she's got. So she'll need a bit of luck from that draw, given that she's usually held up. But at 16-1, I don't mind paying to find out and hope that she does get the gaps.
DJ, should we go in on Amelka again as well? She's 14-1, which I think is a huge price. You can put a line through Ascot. There's some horses, that's a totally different test, isn't it? I just thought she was just starting to get going at Ascot. And up in trip here, I think will be much more up her street. I think 14-1 about her's big, isn't it, as well?
Yeah,
It's unusual to see a Guineas winner at that price, isn't it? A Guineas winner at 14-1, 2 starts later. I wonder if it's a steadily run race, she might get chopped for speed even at this trip.
Yeah, that's possible. But the French Oaks winner is in there as well, isn't she? Sparkling Plenty, who won the Prix de Diane. And she's since been bought privately by the Qatar lot, hasn't she? And they've also got Doha in there, which obviously it's a different yard, and she may be there on her own merits. But with Opera Singer to make the run, and I was thinking Doha will hopefully be in there just to ensure that it's going to be a properly run race. And yeah, I agree. When the two at the head of the market are both sub 2-1, taking so much out, you could back virtually anything, I think, and find that you're on a half decent bet.
And GC, in terms of stories of the season, the Schumacher Gosdens has been bubbling away. There's a feeling that they're beginning to hit top gear now, clearly, the Clarehaven team, and the tide's turning, and booting Emily Upjohn home in Nassau might just be the way to take every monkey off his back.
Yeah, I think it's quite a nice symmetry. Remember, is it 2-3 years ago that Schumacher won the Valiant Stakes at Ascot on Lady Bowthorpe, and she took him on a tremendous ride after that, culminating in a Nassau Stakes win. And that Friendly Soul, by the way, I think is a good filly. I think she has Group 1 potential for the second half of the season. And now he gets his chance on Emily Upjohn, who's been nibbled in the betting to the point at which she's probably a little too short now. But I do think she'll go well. And I get the impression that the tide might be starting to turn for Schumacher and the Gosdens. He didn't ride that Chancellor at the weekend, a highly regarded horse who disappointed to a certain extent. But I believe that horse was very, very babyish and boyish in the pre-parade ring, rearing up and almost going over at one point. So he's probably best forgiven. But no, I quite like this Schumacher angle with Emily Upjohn, and it could be a second Nassau Stakes within 2 or 3 years for him.
Billy's already touched upon the favourite in the Gordon Stakes. Anybody else got anything on their radar for Thursday before we gallop into Friday?
With Jan Bruegel, I agree with Billy. You know, to beat the 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th in the Curragh race at 1.25 miles, all had triple figure ratings. And for him to beat them when still green second time out was notable. And you love it when they have not one, but they have the 2 ears pricked at the line. And that's exactly what he did. But there are a few others on that Thursday card that I think warrant a mention. Let's have a look. The first handicap on the card, that horse of Hamad El Jahani's. We need to come to this. This is a significant or interesting departure for dem boys from Wathnan. Not only are they buying up really smart horses now, but they're buying them up like the Striking Viking and Midnight Gun and sending to this Qatari Newmarket handler, Hamad El Jahani. You know, I'm always trying to get on the case with the big stories, Dave. I've sent a message to him. I'm trying to get a word with him this morning for a written piece. He's not messaged me back yet. But hang on. Oh, it's just no.
Breaking
Just
news.
live. Hi, I'm sorry, but very bad reception in my place. I will try to tax you when I'm in a good place. I hope he means text. But either way, I'm on the case with this Jahani character.
This is good. This is good.
Goodwood signal is notoriously bad, as we all know. Tax
Well, I mean,
you? How can you tax me?
Pod exclusive again.
I mean, if he does tax you, JC, you can put it through expenses, but just the ones. Just the ones. It's really interesting, the striking Viking, isn't it? As you say, the fact it's gone from Kevin, the first one they bought and moved elsewhere, but then you realise there's some other transfers being taking place behind the scenes.
He's
as
going
well,
to be
so.
top favourite for the Richmond Stakes, and I think probably with good reason. But no, it's an unusual move to buy these really promising young horses and then start shifting them from Kevin Ryan and Richard Hannon, who will be, how shall we say, a little frustrated, I think.
Yeah.
Audie, I'm going to have to make a move. I need to head up Trandle Hill. Do you mind if
Oh,
I,
there he is with the umpire's hat on. JC. No problem whatsoever. Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Ed. Best of luck this afternoon.
Looking forward to it. See you later.
Exit stage there. Thank you. Thank you to Ed. He's just departed. We're going to look ahead to the King George Catar Stakes. It's a rematch from Ascot. As Fiora and Big Evs, it's this sprint division. We know there's not much between them. Billy, they're drawn quite close to each other. As Fiora is in 10, Big Evs is in 7. Could the younger legs carry the day this time?
Well, I suppose they could. I mean, he did win the Morecambe here last year, didn't he? So he has a bit of track form. There's unlikely to be much between them again, Dave. Asfura look good at Ascot to me. It's not a race I have a particularly strong opinion on, but it should be a very interesting one. There is one Irish horse in it at the moment, Moss Tucker, but even though he handles good to firm ground, he's definitely better with a cut, so I don't know if he'll run. Pity if he doesn't, because I think Goodwood will really suit him. He has a good record at Tipperary, which would be the kind of closest we get to Goodwood in Ireland, a downhill 5 furlongs. But yeah, it should be a cracking race. Asfura comes out just on top on time form ratings, but again, like I said, there shouldn't be much between them.
Moss Tucker is declared with Billy Leon. Billy looks like
excellent.
I'm wait to see if the thunderstorms arrive or what, but he's been confirmed at the 48-hour stage. David, it's this sprint division. GC touched out in the past. Everything seems to be a 4 on the field job at the minute with these Group 1 sprinters.
It does, yeah. I mean, the interesting thing about this race is the plethora of pace that appears to be in there. I'm presuming Desperate Hero has been declared. Obviously, you've got other front runners in there like Big Evs and Living the Dream. And I think that makes a horse that we've talked a fair bit about on this pod over the last few months. And it's Jasor, who Clive Cox has supplemented. And obviously, the key angle with him is coming back to 5 furlongs for the first time. I think it's the first time in his life, isn't it? Has he raced only at 6 furlongs today? Oh, sorry, he did start out over 5. He won his maiden at 5, sorry. But certainly the first time at 5 furlongs this season. And the way that he's been racing, particularly on his last 2 starts, you think that the tempo that this race is going to be run at, really quick ground, a lot of front runners in there, just so he's just going to be able to make Jim Crowley's life a little bit easier. He's just going to be able to pop him out. And I don't think he's going to have to try and restrain him. He's just going to be able to go at that pace that he wants to go. And in terms of talent, I think he's probably as good as what any of these are. So I think he's a really interesting runner, and I'll probably not be able to resist backing him in this.
Me too. Yeah. I think it's a canny move from Cox, and he comes with a bit of a risk, but I'm sure the natural explosiveness is there. I think that horse, David, that you also mentioned, Desperate Hero, at a price shouldn't be overlooked. I don't think
he's declared. I'm just double checking. I don't think he's actually been declared Desperate Hero.
I haven't got the final decks in front of me, Dave.
I was just, I've been professional for the first time in my career on this podcast, checking it, and I just looked at the King George Catar Stakes. Breaking news: GC's in touch with the New Wathenham, and Desperate Hero is declared. Apologies, he is declared. Drawn 1.
False alarm.
Yeah, false alarm. Billy stormed off.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning that as Forest trainer thinks she'll be better at Goodwood than she was at Ascot, but I think she probably needs to be now that she's got the Group 1 penalty. Having said that, I opposed Audience for the same reason, and that didn't go too well.
I don't think she's going to get it quite as soft up front as what he did, mind.
No, it's a good race, isn't it? It's
really
for
good,
all that we can't find a dominant sprinter, they're always really lively betting races.
What do you make of the Living the Dream jockey switcheroo? It's often the one thing that they go to, is it the first thing people reach for when there's a bit of a lull with a horse?
Well, it wasn't a shock I think what was the shock, if anything, was that they didn't go forward at Sandown. I know he was drawn a little wide, but to ditch the tactics that took him to the Group 1 level seemed very strange. But he just doesn't feel or seem like quite the same horse this year, does he?
Now, before we lose anybody else, we've gone from 5 to 3 in the space of about 4 minutes here. So the dead great danger.
Dropping like flies.
I'm about to wrap up with a final question. We haven't got the decks, obviously, and I barely have the decks for Fridays, I've just proven. But the Stewards' Cup, we've got Saturday. It's a long week, Goodwood. Is there anything else on your radar for Goodwood for the rest of the week, GC? Anything bubbling away?
For me?
For you, GC, sorry.
Yeah, it's right towards the top of the market, but I think that Dark Trooper has a lot of what you look for in a Stewards' Cup horse. I thought he ran a screamer at Royal Ascot, and it's just a little pet theory of mine that could be wrong, but I think the high-drawn horses that day forfeited what was potentially a good track position by edging over to join the centre field group. But either way, he ran a belter, and even from a higher mark, his turn of foot looks like it's going to make him a big runner for Dem Wathnan boys.
No, boys, big strong theme from the podcast. David, anything else on your radar for the week?
Well, I'm interested to see what happens with Aberama Gold. He's been declared for the Racing League on Thursday night and is drawn 12, which is a bit of a negative at Wolverhampton. But he is an interesting one for me on the radar for the Stewards' Cup, not least because if he does get a run, he's off a mark of 90, having won the race last year off, was it 95, I think, last year? So he's obviously a well-handicapped horse, but he's proper on the cusp of whether he'll get in or not from the mark that he's dropped to this year. But his season is sort of mirroring to a certain extent what it did last year, in that his mark came down in the early part, and then he ran in this Ayr Gold Cup trial at Ayr, and came back to form last time. And if he'd have got a clear run there, he might have gone close to winning. So I think he's a horse that is just coming to the boil nicely. And he's just a well-handicapped horse again now. So Aberama Gold is definitely of interest if he does get in. And if not, we'll just keep our powder dry, and maybe there'll be a race for him at the Ebor meeting, perhaps.
And last but not least, Billy, beyond the collar duty, an overheated phone caused you to drop off. You've cooled it down. I mean, in Cork, of all places, an overheated phone. You've dived back on. Thank you so much. I hope the answer to this isn't no now, but have you got anything else on your radar for the rest of the week? Anything else you can offer us up at Goodwood or Galway?
Part of the joys of living in the Irish Riviera down here in Cork, Dave. Sun splitting the stones as usual. Just having a quick look at the Friday declarations for Galway. I'm delighted to see that Willie Mullins has declared serious to run in the Premier Handicap, the 1.5 mile handicap on Friday night. Anyone who was watching the opening day's action at Galway would have seen her win the GPT under David Dunstan. Came from stone last to win. David Dunstan's first winner, I believe, since February 2019. So hats off to him. But she looked like a filly that had plenty in hand on Monday night. She's turning out under a mandatory penalty on Friday. 1.5 miles shouldn't be any inconvenience to her. She's going to take loads of beating, Dave.
Fantastic stuff. Well, that is us. GC's got to go and get taxed. We'll see how that plays out later on in the proceedings. But thanks to Ed for his brief appearance, to Billy for diving back on and being heroic on that aspect, David and GC. There's our thoughts on Ascot, Goodwood and Galway. And best of luck with your own bets over the coming week.
Download the Sporting Life app for the best racing coverage, including live racing blogs, fast results, stable tours, trainer and jockey interviews, expert opinion and tips.